and then I'll welcome you to sit back down, and then we'll continue on. It should be a very familiar passage for us, a very familiar account for us. So, John chapter 4, beginning in verse 1. It reads, "When therefore the Lord knew how the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself baptized not, but his disciples, he left Judea and departed again into Galilee, and he must needs go through Samaria. Then cometh he to a city of Samaria, which is Sychar, near to the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there, and Jesus therefore, being wearied with his journey, sat thus on the well, and it was about the 6th hour. And there cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water. Jesus saith unto her, Give to me to drink. For his disciples were gone away into the city to buy meat. Then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. Jesus answered and said unto her, Thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, Give me to drink. Thou wouldest have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water." You may be seated. We open up here just these first 10 verses, and we find this encounter between Jesus and this Samaritan woman. Now, last time, as we finished John chapter 3, we spoke about purification as it came by the baptism of John, the baptism of Jesus, and we tied these baptisms to the red heifer sacrifice, which is detailed to us in Numbers 19. And we spoke about some of the symbolism there, about how this sacrifice is a very specific animal, something that in Jewish tradition could only have 2 non-red hairs on its entire body, how this heifer would be examined very closely, very carefully, make sure that it was without blemish before it was sacrificed. Its body was burnt in its parts, and then the ashes were used as this anointing for the priests and for the temple grounds. We tied this sacrifice to Christ, but we talked about how as Christ encountered John and began to baptize there in the Jordan, as his apostles began to baptize there in the Jordan, that his ministry was beginning to overcome the ministry of John the Baptist. Remember from times past, the ministry of John the Baptist was primarily to renew the covenant of Israel with God. That's why we saw him there in chapter 1 baptizing on the east side of Jordan. People would cross out of the promised land, out of Israel, to the east side of Jordan. They would be baptized for that remission of sins, and they would enter into the promised land again with this covenant renewed. Christ, as he instituted his baptism, was for something far greater, right? The picture of a covenant with God, this making or this renewing of the covenant with God was still there. There was something more to it. But we find that as Jesus came from his conversation with Nicodemus in Jerusalem, he walked north to meet with John in the Jordan River. There was a spot where there was a lot of water. It wasn't where John the Baptist had been baptizing when Jesus met him coming out of the wilderness, but it was farther north. In fact, if you look in your Bible maps, I'm not going to try and weatherman it today, but just look in your Bible maps. Let me see if I can find the exact one. You should be able to find it in the 12 Tribes of Canaan Bible map if you have it there. I see it there. Let's see if we can find where. You know what? I'm just going to weatherman it. It's fine. It's fine. This will be easier. Follow along with your Bible maps. We find that when Christ came, Jerusalem is down here. I'm pointing right to it. Christ came up, and we find the place that's described for us as this place where John the Baptist was. don't see it exactly, but it's up here a little bit.
Isn't that south of that?
A little bit further north. He was down here. The place where John was baptizing, where Christ found John, was up a little bit higher. I don't see it. I don't see the name of it on here, but it was kind of in this general area. It was a little bit north, actually, of Shechem, Samaria, where Christ would go. He met with John the Baptist up here, did his baptizing, and when when he had heard that the Jews heard that he was baptizing, he baptized more disciples than John the Baptist. He decided that his time there was done and he needed to go back to Galilee. Rather than follow the Jordan River up to Galilee, as he probably could have done, there were some crossings and things like that, he needed to go through Samaria. So he needed to cut west through the land. Samaria is there, Shechem is there, Mount Gerizim is right there. So he travels south a little bit and goes back up to Shechem to meet with this woman. Now Christ knew that this encounter was going to occur, right? Christ is God. But for the travel and things like that, we don't always realize what exactly is encompassed in these people going from these different places, right? It's kind of hard for us to picture where on a map they were and where they went and where they're going. This was quite a bit of time, days of travel on foot as he left Jerusalem and went to where John was at. And as he left where John was and he went to Shechem to meet with this woman, Christ was going out of his way to have these encounters with these people. And we're going to read on here in John 4 from verse 10. We'll just read it in one chunk. Follow along with me if you would. But I want us to have this encounter, this complete encounter in our minds as we talk about why it's important. And we're going to go into a little bit of history here shortly, but let's pick up here in John chapter 4 and verse 11. It says, "The woman saith unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence hast thou the living water? Art thou greater than our father Jacob, which gave us this well, and drank thereof himself, and his children, and his cattle? And Jesus answered and said unto her, Whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again. But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. And the woman said unto him, Sir, give me this water, that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw. And Jesus saith unto her, Go call thy husband, and come hither. And the woman answered and said, I have no husband. And Jesus said unto her, Thou hast well said, I have no husband, for thou hast had 5 husbands, and he whom thou now hast is not thy husband. In that saidest thou truly. And the woman said unto him, Sir, I perceive that thou art a prophet. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and you say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. And Jesus saith unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour comes when ye shall neither in this mountain nor at Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshippers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeketh such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. And the woman said unto him, I know that Messiah cometh, which is called Christ. When he is come, he will tell us all things. And Jesus saith unto her, I that speak unto thee am he. And upon this came his disciples, and marveled that he talked with the woman. Yet no man said, What seekest thou? Or why talkest thou with her? And the woman then left her water pot, and went her way into the city, and saith unto the men, come and see a man which told me all things that ever I did. Is not this the Christ? Then they went out of the city and came unto him. In the meanwhile his disciples prayed him, saying, Master, eat. But he said unto them, I have meat to eat that ye know not of. Therefore said his disciples one to another, Hath any man brought him aught to eat? And Jesus said unto them, My meat is to do the will of him that sent me, and to finish his work. Say not ye, There are yet 4 months, and then cometh harvest? Behold, I say unto you, Lift up your eyes, and look on the fields, for they are white already to harvest. And he that reapeth receiveth wages, and gathereth fruit unto life eternal, that both he that soweth and he that reapeth may rejoice together. And herein is that saying true, One soweth and another reapeth. I sent you to reap that whereupon ye bestowed no labor. Other men labored, and you are entered into their labors. And many of the Samaritans of that city believed on him for the saying of the woman, which testified, He told me all that I ever did. And so when the Samaritans were come to him, they besought him that he would tarry with them, and he abode there 2 days. And many more believed because of his own word. And he said unto the woman, Now we believe not because of thy saying, for we have heard him ourselves, and know that this is indeed the Christ, the Savior of the world. And after 2 days he departed thence and went into Galilee. For Jesus himself testified that a prophet has no honor in his own country. Then when he was come unto Galilee, the Galileans received him, having seen all the things he did at Jerusalem at the feast, for they also went unto the feast. And we'll stop there. So, very lengthy reading. There are a lot of different things here that we could look at, that we could focus in on. Certainly we went through the text of numerous messages that have been preached before out of John chapter 4 by other people. Spirit and truth, fields ripe and ready for harvest, right? A lot of different things. The reason why we went through such a lengthy reading this morning, why we took this entire account as a whole, is because we want to focus not on the specifics of things that Jesus said, but rather his ministry in doing this. Right? We find pertaining to our lives a lot of very important things that Christ did. Our own personal ministry should be inspired by the things that Christ did. We can preach different messages out of these texts, but unless we understand the background, unless we understand the context of these events, it's very easy for us to misrepresent things that are going on in the Scriptures. Right? So that is our endeavor this morning, is to understand not the specifics of what Christ said to the woman. We can certainly go into those things later on, but rather the ministry of Christ in these events as a whole, because this is something that I think we can take a lot away from. Before we really can begin to understand this encounter with Christ and the Samaritan woman, we need to know some history on Samaria and the Samaritans. We find that this kingdom was divided, the kingdom of Israel was divided at Shechem in 1 Kings chapter 12. So let's turn over there. 1 Kings chapter 12. We're just going to grab a couple of references here. We'll grab the first 5 verses, then we'll skip ahead to verse 12. 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 1 says, And Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel were come to Shechem to make him king. And it came to pass, when Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who was yet in Egypt, heard of it, for he was fled from the presence of King Solomon, and Jeroboam dwelt in Egypt, that they sent and called him. And Jeroboam and all the congregation of Israel came, and spoke unto Rehoboam, saying, Thy father made our yoke grievous. Now therefore make thou the grievous service of thy father, and his heavy yoke which he put upon us lighter, and we will serve thee. And he said unto them, Depart yet for 3 days, when come again to me. And the people departed. Skip ahead to verse 12. So Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam the third day, as the king had appointed, saying, Come to me again in the third day. And the king answered the people roughly, and forsook the old men's counsel that they gave him. And he spoke to them after the counsel of the young men, saying, My father made your yoke heavy, and I will add to your yoke. My father also chastened you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. Wherefore the king hearkened not unto the people, for the cause was from the Lord, that he might perform the saying which the Lord spoke by Ahijah the Shilonite unto Jeroboam the son of Nebat. So when all Israel saw that the king hearkened not unto them, the people answered the king, saying, What portion have we in David? Neither have we inheritance with the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel, now see to thine own house, see to thine own house, David. So Israel departed unto their tents. But as for the children of Israel, which dwelt in the cities of Judah, Rehoboam reigned over them. And then King Rehoboam sent Adoram, which was over the tribute, and all Israel, stoned him with stones that he died. And therefore Rehoboam made speed to get him up to his chariot to flee to Jerusalem. So Israel rebelled against the house of David unto this day. We find here the kingdom was divided, a very familiar location to us. Shechem, where Jesus came and met with this woman. I don't think that's a coincidence. Right? As we discover more about the Samaritan people and their origins, maybe make a little bit more sense. But remember that. Shechem was the place where the kingdom was divided. Shechem is where Christ encountered this woman. We find that as God had prophesied to Solomon that he would take the kingdom not from him but from his sons, that he would divide the kingdom. So he promised this man Jeroboam that he would give him a lineage like unto David with the northern tribes, if Jeroboam would humble his heart, if he would serve the Lord. So we find that this kingdom was divided between Rehoboam and Jeroboam. Jeroboam ruling over the 10 tribes in the north, Rehoboam over the 2 tribes in the south. And Jeroboam established his throne there in those northern 10 tribes, in Samaria. We find, if we read farther on in chapter 12, I give you the reference, if you're a note taker here, verses 25 through 30, that with this divide, a new system of worship was established by Jeroboam. He placed a golden calf in Dan and Beersheba on either side of the nation, fearing that if the people still went to Jerusalem every year for the commanded sacrifices and feasts, these different observances, that he would lose the kingdom. God had promised him earlier on that if he followed him and obeyed him, he would establish him and his lineage as king. We find this man Jeroboam had fear in his heart. He would lose power. He would lose his kingdom. And so he established these 2 calves. So we find not just a divide in the nation, but we find a divide in the system of worship. And as this God-ordained, this God-appointed divide in the nation, as he had told Solomon would happen, so we find that the southern nation had Jerusalem, had the temple, had the ordained proper worship of the Lord. The northern tribes decided to do their own thing. Right? So there's a spiritual divide in the nation. And we have to remember this. It comes on later that in 2 Kings we find the kingdom was taken away by Assyria and the people were scattered and the land was resettled. So let's turn over to 2 Kings chapter 17 now. 2 Kings chapter 17. This is where these events are recorded for us. We'll just grab a couple of different references here in chapter 17. Let's begin in verse 6. 2 Kings chapter 17, beginning in verse 6. It reads, In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria and placed them in Halah and in Habor by the river Gozan and in the cities of the Medes. For so it was that the children of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, which had brought them up out of the land of Egypt from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and had feared other gods, and walked in the statutes of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out from before the children of Israel, and of the kings of Israel which they had made. And the children of Israel did secretly those things that were not right against the Lord their God, and they built them high places in all their cities, from the tower of the watchman to the fenced city. And they set them up images and groves in every high hill and under every green tree. And there they burnt incense in all the high places, as did the heathen, whom the Lord carried away before them, and wrought wicked things to provoke the Lord to anger. For they served idols, whereof the Lord had said unto them, Ye shall not do this thing. And we'll stop there. You might think, well, Noah, what exactly... why is this important that we understand this history? What was the capital of Israel? Samaria. What are these people in Jesus' time called? Samaritans. People of Samaria. As the Romans came in and established borders, their different provinces, things like that, make it a little bit easier for them to rule over. They took a portion of this northern area, which was once Israel, as ruled by Jeroboam and these other kings. They took this portion of land and they called it Samaria. They set Samaria up as a capital, as a place where the governor was over this area. The people who dwelt in this area were Samaritans. Right? So this is their history. This is their lineage. This is what they have in their past, is this reputation of being idol worshippers. Right? And this is talking about, here in King 17, this was talking about Jewish people who were doing these things. That lineage still stayed, that reputation stayed. And let's skip ahead a little bit. Let's skip over to verse 20. It says, And the Lord rejected all the seed of Israel, and afflicted them, and delivered them into the hand of spoilers, until he had cast them out of his sight. For he rent Israel from the house of David, and they made Jeroboam the son of Nebat king. And Jeroboam drove Israel from following the Lord, and made them sin a great sin. For the children of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam, which he did. They departed not from them, till the Lord removed Israel out of his sight, as he had said by all his servants the prophets. So was Israel carried away out of their own land to Assyria this day. And the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon, from Cutha, from Ava, from Hamath, from Sepharvaim, and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel. And they possessed Samaria and dwelt in the cities thereof. So we find as Israel was taken out of the land by Assyria, they were exported into the borders of different towns of Assyria, and people from these other cities, these other towns that Assyria had conquered, they were imported into this area. There was still an Israelite presence in the land. There's this Gentile presence that's brought in by Assyria. Gentiles, the Israelites, they intermix, and suddenly you have a people that is not purely of Jewish heritage. They have a Gentile heritage along with them. Let's skip ahead one more time. Verse 33. They feared the Lord and served their own gods, after the manner of the nations whom they carried away from thence. Unto this day they do after the former manners. They fear not the Lord, neither do they after their statutes, or after their ordinances, or after the law and commandment which the Lord commanded the children of Jacob, whom he named Israel, with whom the Lord had made a covenant, and charged them, saying, Ye shall not fear other gods, nor bow yourselves to them, nor serve them, nor sacrifice to them. But the Lord who brought you up out of the land of Egypt with great power and a stretched out arm, him shall you fear, and him shall you worship, and to him shall you do sacrifice. We'll skip ahead, verse 40. Howbeit they did not hearken, but they did after their former manner. So these nations feared the Lord, and served their graven images, both their children and their children's children, as did their fathers. So do they unto this day. Now, in a portion of this chapter which we did not read, the people who had settled in the land began to be plagued by various things. Animals coming in, tearing them to pieces, just different things. And so they made a request, let the people who lived here be brought back in, some priests be brought back in to teach us the way of Yahweh, to teach us the way of the Lord, that we can not be cursed, right? Not be cursed in the land. We find that there was this intermingling of not only the people, but of these different faith systems, these different belief systems. You had the Jewish beliefs, the Jewish faith, the law, the things that were given to them by God, intermixed with these other graven images, these other false deities of these Gentile nations that were brought into this land. And this is a faith system, this is a religious system that persisted in that area. It didn't just go away when the temple was rebuilt after the Babylonian captivity. Right? So we have to understand these Samaritans, not only are they not of purely Jewish or purely Davidic line, purely Abrahamic line, they also have a faith system which is mixed. It's not purely that which God had given to Israel. So they're Gentile, considered to be Gentile people. The Gentile or a heretical system of belief. And when we read all that history to well establish that's what was going on. Right? And this is something that persisted. Let's go on to Ezra chapter 4. I just have a couple verses here that I'll read for you from my notes. But I read it to you from the NASB, but it's Ezra chapter 4, just the first 3 verses. This is after the Judean captivity was released to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. Some of these people in this area wanted to help rebuild the temple, but they were refused. Ezra chapter 4, verse 1 says, Now when the enemies of Judah and Benjamin heard that the people of the exile were building a temple to the Lord God of Israel, they approached Zerubbabel and the heads of the fathers' households and said unto them, Let us build with you, for like you we seek your God, and we have been sacrificing to him since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, who brought us up here. But Zerubbabel, y'all can read it, and Jeshua and the rest of the heads of the fathers' households of Israel said to them, You have nothing in common with us in building a house to our God, but we ourselves will together build for the Lord God of Israel, just as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, commanded us. So the reason why I read that to you from the NASB is because it's a little bit clearer reading that these were people who had been placed there by the king of Assyria. They had intermingled with the Jewish remnant that was there. They had been taught by the priests that were imported into the land. They had been sacrificing to God. At least in their minds, they had been sacrificing to God since they had been planted there. And they wanted to help rebuild the temple, but they were refused. So you find that this divide was really kind of deepened there. It was well established in their history. We, here in Israel, here in Judea, who are endeavoring to reestablish the temple, to reestablish acceptable worship to the Lord, do not mix with, do not intermingle with these other people. There's a very clear divide being drawn there. Well, we find that the Samaritans, that these people had developed their own religious identity. They had taken this mixture of different beliefs, these teachings, these priests that had been brought in, and they mixed them in with the traditions that they had grown up with, traditions of these other lands. They really focused on, centered on this Mount Gerizim, which was right near Shechem. Shechem was at the base or the foot of this mountain, right? Think about Colorado Springs. It's right at the base of the big mountain there, Pikes Peak, right? So it'd be like the people of Colorado Springs hinging their beliefs on Pikes Peak being holy. Okay, it's that kind of dynamic. They can look up, they see the mountain there, and they believe that the Lord has blessed that mountain. We find that this belief was not completely out of nowhere. I'll just give you the references. The blessings were proclaimed on Mount Gerizim based on Deuteronomy 11:29 and chapter 27, verse 12, where Mount Gerizim was proclaimed to be a mountain of blessing. And there was another mountain there, started with a G, can't remember the name of it right now, but it was the mountain of cursing. We see this display put on where the tribes were divided between this Mount Gerizim and this other mountain, and the ones that were on Mount Gerizim were told to proclaim blessings upon Israel, upon the people, and the people on that other mountain were told to proclaim curses. And we find this divide between the people who were blessing and the people who were cursing. We find that the Samaritan belief took this picture of Mount Gerizim as being a mountain of blessing. Because they had been removed from Jerusalem, because they had been removed from Mount Zion, and said, well, we need to be blessed by God. We need to be blessed by Yahweh. So we're going to look at Mount Gerizim as this mountain of blessing. This is going to be our mountain. Right? So we fast forward, just a quick reference to our chapter, John chapter 4, with the Samaritan woman saying, well, we believe that this is God's mountain. We worship on this mountain. That's why. They had taken those blessings that God had proclaimed on Israel from this Mount Gerizim, and they had applied that to that mountain in place of Jerusalem, right? Because they wanted to be right with the Lord as far as they understood it. Now they separated themselves from all of the different places where God said, go to Jerusalem. It's because they were, at this time, a people who had already been divided, not just religiously, but from their lineage itself, been divided from those people in the land. So, by about the 5th century, the Samaritans had established a temple on Mount Gerizim, solidifying their separate worship practices. Right? There was the temple in Jerusalem the Jews went to. Samaritans had a temple on Mount Gerizim. As Greece came in around the 330s BC with the campaigns of Alexander the Great, we find it recorded that the Samaritan people distanced themselves from the Jews even farther. This is an excerpt from the writings of Josephus in his book, Antiquities of the Jews. It says, but when they, the Samaritans, saw that Alexander had so greatly honored the Jews, they thought it best to pretend themselves to be of the same stock, and to be of the race of the Persians and Medes, as the Jews were. So they sent ambassadors to Alexander, desiring to be released from bearing the same burdens with the Jews, and to have their temple on Mount Gerizim honored in the same manner as that at Jerusalem. But when Alexander asked them whether they were the same race of Hebrews, they answered, no, but we are Sidonians. And when he further inquired whether they would live according to the laws of the Greeks, they said they were ready to do so. Accordingly, Alexander, having received their submission, permitted them to continue in their own laws. So we find that based on these questions that were being asked, whether they were, because it was trying to, the attempt was to establish a distinction or the lack of a distinction between them and the rest of the Jews in Israel. They were asked by the government that Alexander the Great had set up, are you guys a part of this nation, or are you separate? And so we find that they separated themselves and said, no, we're of different people. We're Sidonians, or this people that came up from Babylon, and we will live in the laws of the Greeks rather than the laws of the Jews. Because remember that the nation of Judah had been reestablished after the Babylonian captivity, and even into Roman rule, as Greece lost power and as Rome came into power, they were fairly successful in maintaining their own system of laws. It was underneath this external Gentile government, but they had their own set of laws which they followed. They weren't completely beholden to Greek or to Roman law. But we find that these people of forgive me, I just Samaria. I don't know why I lost that. These people of Samaria had divorced themselves away from that, said we'll follow the laws of the Greeks. We're ready to do that. We find then a legal separation between the Jews in Israel and the Samaritan people. About 200 years later, the Samaritan temple at Gerizim was destroyed. And we find that Josephus also writes about this. He says, now when Hyrcanus had received the high priesthood, which his father had held before him, and had shown himself to be a man of great courage in war, and made many expeditions, he marched against the cities of Syria, and took Mebedah and Sameda with the places round about them. And after that he took Shechem and Gerizim, and the nation of the Kuthans, or of the that's just another word for the Samaritans, who dwelt about that temple, which was built in imitation of the temple at Jerusalem. This temple he demolished, and took many other cities and subdued them. So now we find that the Samaritan temple, which had been established on Mount Gerizim, had been destroyed by the Romans who were coming into this area. So we find that by the time of Christ, the divide between the Jews and the Samaritans was as deep and as wide as the Gulf and Sheol. There was a massive divide between these people. They had some heritage in common. They had some beliefs in common. But they were a people who were completely divided from one another, ethnically, religiously, and legally. That's a lot of history, right? I know sometimes I get accused of being more of a Bible teacher than a preacher with my messages. But I want us to understand the context then, why it was so surprising that Jesus was there that day talking to this woman at the well. There was no reason in the mind of a Jew why Jesus, who at that time had been sent to the Jews, should be talking to this Samaritan woman. Ethnically, religiously, legally, completely separate. Okay. We find that by the time of Christ, the Samaritans expected a messianic figure who was called or referred to as the restorer, and they base this on Deuteronomy chapter 18. All right, God said, I'll send you a prophet like unto Moses, and to him you shall, all the things that he commands you shall do, who would restore true worship on Mount Gerizim. And we find that this belief is evident in the Samaritan woman's Samaritan woman's statement that I know Messiah is coming and that he will show us all things. The Samaritans held to the first 5 books of our Bible. They held to the writings of Moses, right? At least all the stuff that didn't have to do with Jerusalem. They held to it. That was the basis of their faith. Excuse me. We find that this focus on Gerizim as the true worship site, the place where God would establish himself, underscores this theological divergence from the Jews. Let's turn over to Luke chapter 9. Luke chapter 9. So we find that Samaria was a city, that Shechem was a city. There's other cities within the province of Samaria. We find that Christ and his apostles went to one of these, and it's recorded for us here in Luke chapter 9. We'll begin in verse 51. It says, And it came to pass, when the time was come that he should be received up, he steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem, and sent messengers before his face, and they went and entered into a village of the Samaritans to make ready for him. And they did not receive him, because his face was though he would go to Jerusalem. And when his disciples, James and John, saw this, they said, Lord, wilt thou that we command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, even as Elias did? But he turned and rebuked them, and said, You know not what manner of spirit you are of. For the Son of Man is not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. And they went to another village. We'll stop there. So we find that these people, because Christ was not just going to them, right? They believed that this Christ, that this Messiah, this restorer would come to them, but they believed that it would be to them, with the exclusion of the Jews. Just like the Jews believed Jesus would be sent to them, with the exclusion of the Samaritans, the exclusion of the Gentiles. There were people who firmly believed that they were the only ones who would have access to Christ, that the promises of God sending himself to come, that it would be to them, that he would establish his kingdom through them. So when the Samaritans realized that he was going to continue to go to Jerusalem, that he wasn't just going to stop there and preach to them and establish his kingdom through them, they rejected him. They didn't want anything to do with this restorer who was going to also restore those people over there. And we find that his disciples asked, well, should we consume them with fire? They've rejected you. Right? Let's destroy them. And Christ said, he's not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. Just as he also told his apostles, as he told the 70, as he sent them out there in beginning chapters of Matthew, they told them if a place wouldn't receive them, to swipe the dust off their feet and move on. Plant the seed. If they receive you, fantastic. If not, move on. Sometimes a testimony is most powerful when you realize what you've given up, what you've forgotten, what you've forsaken. Sometimes people don't have a strong and enduring faith until they give it up for a little while. And then they come back to it. They realize just how important it should have been to them the entire time. And they're unshakable. For these people there in Samaria, he wasn't going to destroy them. If they continued to refuse to have him, they would have their destruction. They would have their judgment. But think about this. As they move on to other towns, as they move on to other places, as they go to those people in Jerusalem, and they hear about the miracles, the wonders, the signs, the preaching that Christ and his disciples do. Think maybe that might have changed some people's minds later on. Just because someone rejects Christ when they first hear about him, when they're first confronted by him, doesn't mean that they're going to continue to reject Christ for the rest of their lives. You never know what fruit the seed you plant in someone's life will bear. Sometimes you just have to wait a really long time to see it. Let's continue on. We find that I'm just trying to find in my notes where I want to go with this. We find that as Christ went into Samaria, right, there were other routes that he could have gone up to Galilee. There are other ways that him and his disciples probably could have taken. There was a specific reason that Christ went to Shechem that day, to that well that was there, at the foot of Mount Gerizim, where the Samaritan people they just knew that God would establish his temple there, on that mountain. Jesus knew that he would have this encounter with a woman who was completely separated from the Jews, ethnically, religiously, legally. But then we read this account. We already read it. We don't need to read it again. We read about how Christ told her, no, there's some things that you guys have wrong. I'm the one that you're looking for. There is life to be found. There's living, everlasting water to be found here. And she, because of that encounter with Christ, went into her city, into this place that had been ostracized as much as they separated themselves from Jerusalem, from the Jews, been completely separated from the Jews. And many people believed because of her testimony. It wasn't just the woman at the well who benefited from this encounter with Christ. If Christ had just continued to skirt around Samaria, as so many of the Jews did, right? Because this was, there was a border, there were roads, there were ways around Samaria. You can make it up to Galilee without going through Samaria. If Christ had continued to just separate himself from this woman, there never would have been this encounter at the well. This woman's life, the lives of all those other people, would not have been touched by Christ. They would not have known and understood that the Messiah had come. They would not have been corrected in their belief that God would establish his temple there on Mount Gerizim. They would have continued to believe a lie. But because Christ saw fit to have this encounter despite what everybody else thought, despite what the Jewish nation had divide that had been built over centuries, these people's lives were changed. So we find today, don't we? How many people do we encounter on a daily basis who are just too far gone? Why would I talk to them? Why would I go to them with the gospel? We also should note that the conversation which Christ had with this woman was far different than the conversation that he had with Nicodemus. With Nicodemus, he had a very deep theological discussion about the resurrection in the kingdom. With this woman, he had a far simpler discussion. It's not on this mountain, just like it's not in Jerusalem. One of the reasons why you two are so divided doesn't even matter. The way that we interact with people in our lives, it's going to be different. We're not going to be able to have deep theological discussions with someone. For some, they just need to hear the simplicity of serve Christ. Give your life to Him. It's a wonderful thing. For others, like Nicodemus, they've got some things wrong. They need to hear some meatier, have some meatier discussions about the Word. Let me show you where you're wrong. Let me show you what the Scriptures actually say about these things. For us, it's easy to read over John chapter 4 and just look at it as a wonderful thing that, yeah, Christ went and He talked to a woman, and she came to faith in Him. Hallelujah. When we understand the historical and cultural context behind it, it makes it so much more impactful. If Christ is willing to go and to talk to this woman, who he had no reason to talk to as far as the Jews were concerned, who in our lives is beyond our reaching out to? For what reason would we have to not talk to someone about Christ if this is what Christ was willing to do? Religiously, ethnically, legally, totally separated from the people that Christ had been sent to. And yet Christ was also sent to those Samaritans. So it is that we, as strangers and pilgrims in this world, religiously, legally, you could even, not technically, ethnically, but we're different people. Right? We're born again. We're born from above. We're separated from the people in this world. Yeah, we're here for the express purpose of bringing the word of the Lord to them. Let's turn over to 1 John chapter 3 as we prepare to close. And we went a little bit longer today. I hope I didn't bore you too much. 1 John chapter 3 will begin in verse 18. It reads, "My little children, let us not love in the word, neither in tongue, but in deed and in truth. And hereby we know that we are of the truth, and shall assure our hearts before Him. For if our heart condemn us, God is greater than our heart, and knoweth all things. Beloved, if our heart condemn us not, then have we confidence toward God. And whatsoever we ask, we receive of Him, because we keep His commandments and do those things that are pleasing in His sight. And this is His commandment, that we should believe on the name of His Son, Jesus Christ, and love one another as He gave us commandment. And he that keepeth His commandments dwelleth in Him, and He in him. And hereby we know that He abides in us by the Spirit which He has given us." Jesus knew the heart of that woman at the well. He knew the husbands that she had had. He knew the life that she was living. And yet He knew that to talk to her that day would not just touch her life, but the lives of all those around her. We do not know the hearts of men. We do not know how we can reach those in our lives. God does. So as He sends us to these people, as we encounter these people in our lives, let's not be bashful. Everybody needs to hear. Let's not be unsure of ourselves or the message that we bring. I even feel unconfident a lot of times standing before you. Lord, what do I feed these people? They're more experienced. They're older than I am. They know the Bible better. They've been in it so much longer than I've been alive. But the Lord knows. And He will put those words on your tongue. The Lord knows. He will send those people into you. That's all I have for you this morning. I hope and I pray that these things were a blessing to you. Let's all stand together.